I just wanted to start with the big news. I think it's huge news. Dave Clark leaving. He's at the top of the food chain, reports directly to Andy Jassy. I'm here with Leah McHugh, also of e-commerce Chris. I'm Chris of e-commerce Chris. And we're here with Stan Friedlander. Stan and I have known each other for a while. He was a speaker at our recent Seller Velocity conference, 10 years at Amazon. And I guess the question of the hour is, what's your initial take or interpretation of why Dave Clark's leaving now, some of the causes, why is he leaving so abruptly? It looks like he's only there for 3 more weeks, which is definitely not how it was set up when Jeff Wilke left a couple of years ago.
And it's not typical for Amazon with any executive, even lower down. That's not typical. That would usually imply they either have someplace they're going or it's not on amicable terms.
Right.
And my guess is it's more the latter. And you can just look at, was this potentially the wrong role? He followed in Wilke's footsteps, but Wilke took over, retail and ultimately all consumer at a time when Amazon was very small by today's standards. I'm not saying back in 2007, 2008 to be an $18 billion company at that time, truly small, but when you compare it to a $300 to $400 billion multinational where you're doing multi-billions in several other countries, it's not the same company. And you're also not dealing with the same sort of political climate that you would have been dealing with in 2007. If Amazon makes a mistake in 2007, sure, they have to, own up to it or whatever, but the amount of press they have to deal with back in 2007 versus what they would have to deal with today is nowhere near the same.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you have, and it's not to say Wilke could or wouldn't have been able to do this, it's more a matter of he was able to grow into a role without having to suddenly become this political lightning rod that Amazon is today. And it's a different role than what Wilke took over 15 years ago.
Do you think Dave Clark was supposed to absorb some of the stuff that's being thrown at Andy Jassy right now? Whether it's complaints about hundreds of millions in bonuses But
I'd argue, well, whether Jassy or any of these folks deserve the money, that, arguably, look, at the end of the day, if the stock had stayed at 3,400 or gone up to 3,800, no one would complain.
Right.
But when the stock ends up going down to 22 to 2,400, and it seems to be like it may stay there a bit based on the most recent result, then most other public companies, you would absolutely see changes.
Yeah.
Amazon's just not used to that. Amazon's not used to having to answer to a quarterly earnings report, and the company doesn't typically like to have to respond to that. But I think when you combine not just our sales where they want them to be, our margins where they want them to be, it's also when you start thinking about the complaints about sustainability, employees that were potentially fired for complaining about sustainability and the lack thereof, employees that were potentially fired because they may form a union, and then how is that going? When you combine all of these things and your stock goes down. And
the antitrust investigations too. Yeah.
Well, now they have trouble with too many warehouses that they're trying to rent out to other people as well.
Yeah.
That's right. So I think you're just seeing a lot of this come to a head. And is that on Jassy? I'd argue most of this is US based. Most of this is tied to retail. That's under Clark, which ultimately is still under Jassy. But the reality is that's more under Clark than, okay, is this a worldwide problem?
Right.
Doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it's a U.S. problem.
Right.
So,
And of course, we take a huge amount of interest in the escalations process. And at this point, a lot of people have written a lot of emails to somebody like Dave Clark asking for reinstatement, or trying to fix their brand registry issues that are just going in circles, or they've escalated to people who report directly to Dave Clark right now, senior VPs. Some of those appeals were delegated to managers who didn't notice it, who didn't do it, didn't take any actions. So we always wonder, Lee and I talk about this quite a bit, how our escalations changed after one of these higher ups leave. Like we talked about it last with Wilke, because people were sending stuff directly to Wilkie too. Now you've got Dave Clark, like the second really high level, highly placed executive leaving. And this is somebody who historically would get escalations for listing reinstatements or account reinstatements. Sometimes the right action would be taken, it would be delegated appropriately. But as we've talked about, for the months into years, a lot of times the right action isn't taken and those escalations disappear into the ether. And we always wonder, like, was it just kicked down to the same team that reports up to these guys that botched the work in the first pass?
I'm wondering if they might actually split his role into multiple positions because, one, Amazon's being kind of cagey about the succession plan for him, and two, as of right now, he's only one of two direct reports to Jassy, and I'd be surprised if that stays that way.
Potentially. I mean, I have my own set of opinions that they've had a tendency to keep international and North America relatively separate, even if it all reported into Dave Clark. Mm-hmm. I could see making that more of a concerted effort to have more linkage and a process in place where international and North America are let's just say more real time linked up. Because mm-hmm. today, I would argue they still are not. That would be something that could come about from this changeover. Meaning, you have a very Seattle-based headquarters. There is a reality that there's a Seattle-based sort of way of thinking, and then everyone else. Mm-hmm. I would argue that they could look at how to make that not so much the case, mm-hmm. and use this as a means to potentially take care of that.
How do you think the higher-ups understand that a lot of things that should be happening aren't happening in their lower ranks in terms of fixing brand issues for brands that are losing millions of dollars with listings that are down for like no reason, or just the communication is, again.
I mean, I think Amazon is relatively good at still dealing with the end use consumer, but what are brands and what are sellers going through? Mm-hmm. I think that's fallen onto automation ears.
Yes.
At the detriment of what's kind of going on the extremes. And Amazon may still say, well, 2 standard deviations away, do we really want to care? Well, that's not Six Sigma if you're within 2 standard deviations.
Right,
so
right.
I would argue that you may have found that as some of these conversations of diving in, the answers maybe are not that great. And I'm not just speaking to the processes that we've seen in regard to abuse cases and whatever else you want to call with it, reviews abuse, sellers abuse, pricing, what have you, mm-hmm. and who ultimately is owning that, and how maybe he has found out some things that he can tell that the process is not as buttoned up as you and I may see all the time. It's mm-hmm. not that. Maybe he's seeing that, and that could be just one thing.
Maybe Jassy's, he could just be reshuffling the deck, and he planned this 12 months ago too, right? Leah can tell you how many brand cases for really large brands that we've worked on have been seemingly straightforward, seemingly easy to resolve for anyone who understands how to use the tools, or anyone who understands the repetitive problems that are happening with high-level brands who are screaming into the void and not getting any attention from VP level executives.
I think more concerning for me is that they are getting the attention of the VP level executives and it's still not getting fixed.
Yeah,
that's the bigger concern.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Is that I would say, especially as it pertains to abuse cases, mm-hmm. it still feels like it's whack-a-mole. Yes, I can find that if I contact the right people, maybe I can get that problem to go away, but I don't get the process fixed. Right. Which that seems bizarre to me, and that's not how I would handle. That's certainly not how I would handle things if I was still at the company. And
we've always heard that executives rise in the ranks and get to that senior VP or higher level at Amazon because they have like an engineer's process-based process improvement mind. Maybe in addition to being able to manage other people who have process improvement type minds. So if that's the case, and if they're anointed on that basis, then why are process fixes either absent or so slow in the creation. That's what my question
Yeah.
would be to his successor.
Yeah, I agree, and it's pretty easy to point out cases that just seem to languish and or repeated problems of the same nature that you and I tend to see. And unfortunately, I mean, you can easily describe a situation of where you know, as we all know, file a ticket, create a case, and that's your starting point before you can
Hmm.
even escalate. But you can only escalate if you happen to know someone, you know,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
within, because Amazon's not going to tell it to you. Um,
It's not a
but that person,
democracy.
but the reality is, it's pretty easy to see that that case is filed, and the person who's reading that case has a timeline,
Mm-hmm.
and that timeline is, yes, you'd like to resolve this case in the best manner possible, but if you also are being reviewed on how many cases do you resolve per week, per day, per month,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to say no.
Hmm.
It's
Right.
easier to deny. And whenever you have to dig in and dive in, as much as dive deep is a critical leadership principle within Amazon, the reality is you actually create an incentive for them not to.
Yeah.
Because,
Right. And that's what it seems like more and more teams are solely being measured on speed and aren't
yes,
being measured at all on quality. And also, it seems that more and more of the teams are even more siloed than before. So, any issue that takes more than one team to resolve are like next to impossible to actually get a
that's right.
resolution on.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not learning from
I
their mistakes. I mean, they see mistakes. When you point them out, Stan, when Leah points them out, when I point them out in the escalation process, we know that it gets to somebody who identifies an error based on the fact that it gets fixed or the response that we get initially. But they know the mistakes are there, but no one seems to say we got to prevent this from happening. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting these. I thought naively that out of selfish interest, if nothing else, they would want to fix some of this stuff. But we're still in a transfer it around, hand the ball around, kind of pass the buck universe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's the discouraging piece. There's just not a lot of deep diving. We're talking about deep dives.
Right.
We see a
yeah,
lot of superficial review, generically phrased communication that like a lot of sellers and brands don't even know how to read between the lines or read those tea leaves the way we do. I mean, Leah and I get all these people who say, I got this message back to the escalation. What the heck are they trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Or do they even know what they're trying to tell me? Or are they asking me for more information? Or are they asking me to help solve my own problem by telling them what the nature of it is because they don't want to spend all day looking through past account annotations? Like, that's the part that kind of frightens me the most. But the right kind of process fix, maybe they wouldn't have to deal with as much escalation work as they have in front of them.
that's kind of typical of what I've seen. Is it's just, again, it's just easier for that first line person to just deny,
Right.
and then send a very generic example. Would be, you're denied for a customer experience reasons,
Mm-hmm.
hiding behind a customer experience, not explaining what the detail is of what you can do to fix this.
Right.
But when you find certain people, let's say at manager level or whatever, usually, and this is when I say usually, a very high probability, you will get a more, it still may be no, and maybe you
Mm-hmm.
deserve to know, but you will get a detailed answer as to why. And why that can't happen from the first line person, because you would certainly do that for an end use consumer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you not treating a seller and or a brand like they are an end use consumer? Especially when you're talking about some of these people are doing millions of dollars per year.
Mm-hmm.
Not that size should matter, but it is
Right.
interesting how they do treat an end use consumer better than they do a seller or a brand.
Yeah. A lot of people would escalate, whether it's with us or someone else, would escalate to Dave Clark saying they would lead with the numbers, the inability for this team to correct this problem, which is not an uncommon edge case outlier problem, has cost us 3 million in lost sales.
In a week.
So in a month or a week or
Yeah.
whatever, and you're the type of person, I'm paraphrasing here, but you're the type of person who can understand these types of numbers. Where if we go another week or two where, there's 500,000 or 1 million in sales that we're not doing, and all because we keep getting messages back from your team saying we're still reviewing it. Nothing about, no promises about SLA, no, you can hold me to it. I'll have this reviewed within 72 hours. They would never say that. They would say,
That's
look,
right.
we're reviewing it. like we told you 2 weeks ago when we said we were reviewing it. Guess what? We're still reviewing it. We're going to take however long it takes. You're at the back of a queue. Like you said, over automation.
Well, even the
Used to be.
SLAs have become crazy. I've been
Yeah.
getting messages from brand registry that you shouldn't expect a response for 15 business days.
Yeah.
Like that
I
is
don't
a
know if you've
very
seen
long
those.
time if you're losing a lot of
Yeah.
money.
I don't know if you've
Yeah,
seen those,
that's
Stan, the 15-day.
yeah,
We thought
yeah.
that was a
I've heard of
one-time
it.
message,
No,
but now we see
I've
it.
seen many of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's starting to not starting to. Sorry, it is sounding like the cable companies of old.
Yeah, exactly.
Where
Yes.
we'll come fix this next week,
Right.
and you're supposed to just take off of work for any.
Right. And hope you actually
And
show up.
Right.
yeah, so let's not kid ourselves. That sounds like a monopoly, which obviously it's a
Yeah.
word I couldn't use when I was there.
Instead of
But
8 a.m. to 6 p.m., the answer is June 8th to 26th
yeah,
or something like that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that would not be acceptable internally.
Yeah.
Normal for almost anything, it's a 2 business day turnaround, really, of anything, especially if it's just a response.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that someone is saying that I'll get back to you next week, 5 business days just to give you an answer,
Right.
is somewhat ridiculous. And they should be embarrassed by that as customer service, as it pertains to sellers and brands.
Well, and particularly when a lot of the times that answer ends up being the exact same thing that they had sent you in the first
Yeah.
place, and you have not moved forward at all 15 days later.
Right.
So,
And you still aren't given an escalation.
right. And still no path to
There's
do
no
the next
escalation.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some people with the paid account management program, the SAS Core program, their account managers will say, "Look, give me some time to look into it. I'll create an internal escalation ticket." And these are managed accounts. This is a pay-in fee for service. And they'll come back 5 days later with, "Well, the answer I got was pretty much the answer you got. So you have to do what the last person told you." So several days later, no movement, no improvement, and you're just going back and doing the same thing again. Why
And you're
would you
paying
offer a
them.
program that you're paying
Yeah.
for? I
Yeah.
mean, that's something where people ditch that program because, and a lot of sellers and brands, that's their first contact with an internal Amazonian, their first consistent contact. So imagine how that looks when you're going to them later and you say, "Do you want to join this program? Do you want to join that program? Do you want to try this?" And it's like, "Well, I've been paying for an account manager. I've mostly wasted my time. They haven't helped me do that much, and I've already ditched it." You know? So,
I agree.
yeah. Any other thoughts before we wrap in terms of, we don't have to get into like a potential list of
I was
successors,
going to say,
but doesn't, I
No.
mean, names don't matter as much as
no.
what kind of person. The main scouting report on Jassy is that he's a micromanager. It showed up in the Bloomberg story. It's been discussed before. And I did a whole presentation at the Prosper Show on escalations in the age of Jassy for this reason, because when they reshuffle the deck, you're wondering, well, will things be better or worse? Will they be solved quicker or take longer? So whoever succeeds, whatever their name and title is today, I mean, will they be willing to be micromanaged by Andy Jassy, number one? Number two, will they be able to solve some of these process problems better than the previous person?
I would look for someone that they themselves might be mildly accused of being a micromanager, and
Mm-hmm.
also someone that has had multiple. I mean, everyone at Amazon typically has had multiple roles, but I mean, no offense to Dave Clark, but he was
Right.
logistics.
Mhm.
I think you will find it will be someone that likely has had some exposure to retail, some exposure maybe even to both domestic and internet, some exposure to either seller services separate of retail, and potentially some exposure to tech.
Mm.
I mean, that would make a lot of sense.
That would be ideal.
and or logistics. But just saying that this person grew up within logistics and is going to move from logistics to the head of retail or head of consumer. I would be surprised if they did that again. I would say that going with someone that has been in at least a few of these different areas, and that may narrow the list down quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
And
That would be
somebody
my
who
opinion.
knows global
But
regional
by the way,
marketplaces.
just to be clear, no one's called me to ask my opinion.
Yeah. We're
We
the first
did.
ones to call you,
Yeah.
Stan.
Yeah,
But you
exactly.
never know. The news seems to be taking this pretty seriously. We've seen a lot of like top story
A lot of
announcements,
articles.
which means that, one of us might be getting one of these phone calls. But yeah, and somebody who knows and understands regional marketplaces and how UK and Europe is different from the US. I think that's global experience, an understanding of Japan marketplace, UK marketplace, US, Canada all together, one global understanding I think would be helpful. But how many of those people exist? I don't know. We'll find out. I think also
Yeah.
somebody who's maybe been exposed, like somebody who's publicly known, has been exposed to government review of things or exposed to the media in the past would be helpful.
That's a big one. Is
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because and that's not easy for Amazon since we're pretty much you know you
Yeah.
don't talk to the press,
Right.
so
Muzzled.
a lot of folks don't have a ton of experience where it's really a microscope. I
Yeah.
mean, once you obviously get to that level, you really are under a microscope for anything going wrong, and especially at even the S team level, most of the S team, other than maybe speaking to a trade publication, the reality is they're not speaking about problems for the most part. That's PR,
Right.
you know, and that gets to be difficult if you're the CEO of consumer.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Awesome. Well, let's do this again when they announce who it's going to be.
Yes.
Let's have a part two.
no worries.
But thanks for taking the time to talk today, Stan Friedlander
No worries.
and Leah McHugh, not
Thanks,
Lee.
Dan.